I had a customer who's going through a significant change in their organization, a cybersecurity transformation program, and I just mentioned, hey, based on what you're trying to do, I've got these two guys here who've done exactly the same thing, and they could bring a team over too. And why don't you speak to their former boss and hear a little bit about what they say about these people. And eventually we ended up hiring those two people from what I call like a proactive reference check. And that was over 10 million yen in revenue for me just from that conversation. I didn't have to do any search because I
Mm-hmm.
already knew the people. I'm just connecting people with problems.
Mm.
And in fact, one of the things I really enjoy about what I do is I'm not limited to just helping my customers from a permanent point of view. I've also helped them from a contracting point of view. I've also helped them from
Mm.
a consulting point of view. And so we've done easily over 150 million yen in contract revenue and also over 400 million yen in revenue in consulting referrals too. So
Wow.
it's just being able to connect the dots from that
Mm.
point.
As you can see, I'm joined by Stephen Lee, who's made a name for himself, and he's only been on the recruitment scene for under 6 years now, but he's made millions in revenue, and he has also been promoted to senior practice director at Robert Half. He explains in the episode how he has made such strides and the combination of the strategy on LinkedIn, using his creativity, niching down, and also coaching that have all kind of come together to make him into the leader that he is today. So I hope that you take some of his very practical strategies away from this episode. And as always, looking forward to your feedback. Enjoy. Thank you for being here. And you're one of the very first people who was on LinkedIn and kind of making a huge impression to everybody. I think you came on the scene quickly. I remember when you joined Robert Half, and I was just like, who is this guy? And I had a different impression of you, so I thought you were maybe going to be extremely cocky, and I was surprised to see how humble and how, well spoken and almost reserved you are, but really how much you care about people. So I just want to start out with, can you tell people a little bit about getting into recruitment and where you're at now?
Well, first of all, I think you're definitely seeing version two of Steven rather than the arrogant, cocky recruiter when I first started. But I think what's interesting when I first started, it feels in a very cliche way, it feels like destiny in a way that this was the job for me. So before I started recruitment, I actually used to work in financial markets, and I was in a role where we would help senior management and the traders understand where their trading book risk is. So we'd be dealing with like foreign exchange, equities, energy trading risk. And the parts I really liked about the role was speaking with people, understanding what's important to them and delivering value to them. But what I didn't like was a lot of the spreadsheets and reports. So as you can imagine, like day in and day out, things don't really change much. It wasn't as fulfilling. But what I did was during that time working, I helped about 25 people change jobs, whether it was through career advice or directly inviting them to come to my company. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I could do this full time and help more people and also in the process get paid for it? Wouldn't that make a lot of sense? So that's kind of how I got into it initially and had that idea. Now, along the way, things happened during that time. So, especially during COVID. So, COVID happened. I'm in Japan. Recruitment kind of sucks for me at this stage because it was bloody hard. And to be honest, I was struggling. And I remember people would come up and say, "Well, don't you wish you still had that stable job? Don't you wish you stayed in Australia? Don't you wish you were still in the bank?"
Hmm.
And people say that out of love for you and care. But what's interesting is that when I visited Sydney about a few years ago, my team disbanded. They basically got rid of the function. So it kind
In
of highlights to
finance.
me there's no such thing as a safe job. And I think as long as you're adding value, you're making money for the business, it's very, very hard for them to replace your job.
100%. Yeah, someone asked me the other day, where can I go that's a stable job? Because recruitment is not stable. It's just so up and down, so risky. I was like, nowhere. you have to build it yourself, right? You have to add that value. So, but you've done a great job of doing that and making yourself irreplaceable, basically. Do you want, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your achievements, how long you've been in the industry, when things started to kind of click.
Um, I've been in a very fortunate position to learn from a lot of other people. So I did over a million USD in 2022, and since then consistently been one of the top three performers in the APAC region for our perm business. And I think it's easy to perform well for 1 year, but it's very, very difficult to perform consistently year on year on year on year because I think it's less about luck and it's more about how can you repeat your process, especially when your top clients stop hiring. What do you do then? So that's kind of been the journey that I've been on is how do you find predictable revenue um, from that point of view?
And what have you unlocked about that?
Um, what I find is that every year is a different year. There's always a
Mm,
different theme. So I'll give you an example. In 2022, we made a lot of money from English only speaking candidates who are highly, highly technical. So I really enjoyed speaking to these people because I could go deep into some technical conversations with them, learn a little about, what's DevSecOps, what's zero trust, what does zero trust and identity access management security look like? And pretty much by 2023, the market completely changed. Clients were no longer looking for these types of people, and we had to pivot back towards bilingual or Japanese only speaking cybersecurity candidates. So I think the hardest thing when you've tasted success is letting go of that formula. So letting go of what made me money here before and trying something new or repivoting your customer base. It was extremely difficult because there's an attachment to that not only to the people that you serve, but also to what worked in the past. So I think that ability to shift your mindset, shift your approach is really, really important in staying successful and making sure you're staying relevant to add value to your customers.
so you did something that worked and it worked super well, but you were also aware enough to not try and do it again and hit your head against the wall once it was clear that it wasn't working.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even just more recently last year, it was bloody tough year for me personally. So I remember there was health challenges and there was also business challenges where at the age of 34, I was completely blinded in my left eye.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I had a cataract, and even if you were just a few meters in front of me, I would not be able to make out that's a person there. You'll just
Whoa.
imagine just seeing completely white. And I thought, what the heck is going on? To make matters worse, I was playing futsal, and I ended up dislocating my shoulder. It was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life, and no one ever told me you don't use your shoulder in futsal. So I took a fairly nasty fall. It popped out, and to make matters worse, business was going really bad for me. I think I only helped 1.5 customers with a job change in the first 5 months of 2024. So, as someone who's experienced a lot of success, coming back down to that is like, oh, did I forget how to recruit? And a lot of things happen. A lot of things happen in there because you again, the market changed or the team dynamics changed where I was making a lot of success from bringing a lot of jobs and my team would be bringing a lot of the candidates. But all of a sudden, they've become more independent, which is great. They've been developing their own client portfolio. And all of a sudden, I don't have all these candidates interviewing with my clients. So I had to repivot again towards, okay, I need to speak to candidates again. Um, and in the end, I ended up coming number one in APAC for perm for that year. So it was definitely a comeback year. And I can go into a little bit about what we did specifically, if that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear your strategy.
Yeah. So I think one of the key things one of the key things that really kind of irritates me about recruitment is when you're kind of stuck in company rules. So the company rules say this, you must only serve a certain industry like finance, insurance. You must only serve healthcare. Well, does that really help your customers who are industry agnostic? So in cybersecurity, for example,
Mm.
people move across different industries from banking to healthcare to technology, and they don't want to be limited by just one sector because that's your company rules. So I kind of understood, well, what are the pain points for my customers? And I think they typically don't want to speak to so many recruiters. And I said, well, what if we could create a one-stop shop where you would speak to my team, myself, and you would have access to pretty much most of the roles on the market. And a lot of the roles that we have access to are not advertised on LinkedIn. Over 50% are not advertised on LinkedIn. About 95% of our interactions are directly with the hiring manager. So you're getting this unfettered access to relationships, opportunities where there's even no JD that you wouldn't get access to anywhere else. And we took it a step further to say, well, how can we document the journey so you know what to expect as a candidate? As you know, people don't change jobs often here in Japan. I think it's on average, it's somewhere between once every 14 years on average, and
Wow.
that's including lifers in the Japan
Hmm.
ecosystem. Um, so you can imagine it's a very stressful situation. It's a really stressful emotional time for people where they're looking for some certainty. So they want to know what to expect. They want to know, well, step one is this, writing a CV. How do I even write an English CV? Number two is, what can I expect from the interview? And one of my best tips for people interviewing was go and read the investor relations report. It gives you a nice summary of number one, where is the company making money? Number two, what is their strategy? And number three, where are they investing money? So from a cybersecurity point of view, you quickly understand, well, how does this company make money? What do I need to protect? Because that's exactly what we're protecting is we're protecting the cash flow, the reputation for the company. So we started documenting all these things to say, this is what you can expect. We also took it another step further by introducing interview preparations, very detailed interview preparations that we would be able to distribute easily via Google Docs to the candidates. And it would be entirely comprehensive. So people would say, I feel like you know your customers very well or your clients very well. And I feel like I have the confidence to ace the interview. And that's how we've made a lot of our success is by changing the whole process of, recruitment companies want you to do volume, volume, volume. It's all about hitting your KPIs. But here I have the freedom to decide, well, what adds more value to my customers? And in the end, we deal with a smaller number of people, but we provide quality service because there are that group of people who really care about that. They really care about the quality service rather than volume and all that. So that's been a key part of our strategy.
And this kind of speaks to, I was going to ask you how you pivoted to targeting Japanese candidates, because that's what now the companies are looking for, I guess, or are they the bilinguals and the Japanese natives? So I guess does the quality, is that one of the things that you would recommend when you're trying to target that pool of people, or is there something else that you've done?
I think one big part of it is the quality and the
Mm,
service experience that you feel. So if
mm,
you if you do business with any service-oriented provider in Japan, I think you'd get a very similar experience. So, I was out looking at properties the other day, and the real estate agent, they would print off, here's a copy of all the properties that we're visiting today. You go and visit the house. Oh, here are some slippers that I've packed for you,
mm.
right? It's just that like they've thought about all these little things. They've thought about all these little things for you to make it easier for you as the customer to do business with them. They even add you online. They even add you on the line app because who likes to deal with emails these days? It's that customer service mindset helps you add more value to your customers, and in turn, you're able to win more business.
And I love what you said that the structure of what you're doing should not be fitting the rules necessarily, like this square that your company has created, but it should fit the kind of amalgamous shape of what your customer pool wants at the time. And that might change year on year, as you've seen. So being able to adapt your style.
And I was very much influenced by Robin Sharma. He would always say, I listened to his podcast so many times, at least 10 times for each episode that he's got. And he would talk about this concept of add 10x value more than what your customers ever expect.
Hmm.
So add 10x value more than what your customers deserve to expect. And I really took that in as part of our business model is that principle.
Hmm. Well, it's not hard to see how quickly you stand out, when you are doing that. It sounds similar to what we were doing back at my old company as well. And it's a red ocean for sure. There's tons of cybersecurity recruiters out there, there's tons of finance recruiters out there, but the ones that are really taking the time to do these things, there is a very slim amount. So,
You don't bill
and
100 million yen without having some process to back you up, right?
yeah,
And I think it's a real shame because I think there are a lot of recruiters there who are really passionate about their job and they want to do what's right for the customer, but it's the
mm,
rules in that company which stop them from doing that. And I think,
hmm
my hope is in the future is that a lot more recruitment companies can be more oriented towards this customer service experience that they provide. Otherwise, they
mm,
risk going irrelevant, especially as AI is coming and disrupting the business model of how recruitment is traditionally being done.
mm. Yeah, I mean, any AI agent can just be spamming out job listings to people in direct messaging on LinkedIn. And I'm curious about this because I get a lot of questions from clients asking me like, do you should I send a job pitch in a direct message in LinkedIn? Like, do you ever send a JD um, first message or not? Do you ever do that, or what's your process like?
For me personally, I rarely send LinkedIn scout mails.
Hmm.
We've been fortunate enough to build an extensive network of connections in that cybersecurity space. So typically, when I speak to a client and they tell me about a problem that they've been having, I already know I already know who can solve that problem. And I'll give you an
Hmm.
example. I had a customer who's going through a significant change in their organization, a cybersecurity transformation program, and they're looking to hire two key positions. Actually, they didn't have a requisition on. They didn't have a
Hmm.
requisition on, and I just mentioned, hey, based on what you're trying to do, I've got these two guys here who've done exactly the same thing, and they could bring a team over too. And why don't you speak to their former boss? And hear a little bit about what they say about these people, how they could fit in. And eventually we ended up hiring those two people from what I call like a proactive reference check. And that was over 10 million yen in revenue for me just from that conversation. I didn't have to do any search because I
Hmm.
already knew the people. I already had a strong relationship with those people in the market that I'm just connecting people with problems.
Hmm.
And in fact, one of the things I really enjoy about what I do is I'm not limited to just helping my customers from a permanent point of view. I've also helped them from a contracting point of view. I've also helped them from
Hmm.
a consulting point of view by connecting them with problems. Because remember, permanent recruiting is one way to solve the problem of not having enough resources, but there are other ways to do that. And so we've done, gosh, I'm just trying to think, easily over 150 million yen in contract revenue. That's through
Wow.
introducing to my colleagues, and also over 400 million yen in revenue in consulting referrals too. So
Wow.
it's just being able to connect the dots from that point. And that's
Hmm.
something that people probably don't see is just the business side of understanding what are their pain points and connecting those things together.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, when you really have an understanding about your client's needs and what your candidate's skills are, and all the different players in the market, who was their former boss, what did that person think? You've spoken to them before, and having these creative ideas and not being afraid to approach it. It sounds like it's just makes everything explode. And I love how you're using. I'm curious how you're using LinkedIn then, because you already have this extensive network that you've built up.
Yep.
Did you use LinkedIn to build up this network that is going on behind the scenes and, giving you access to candidates that are not even probably using LinkedIn. And did you use LinkedIn to build this out, or like how did you what is the strategy on LinkedIn right now?
Sure. So when I first started, I consumed Greg Savage's masterclass. So Greg Savage is a legend in the recruitment industry. He's done it before, he's seen it before, and
Yeah.
he was recommended by a friend, and he mentions the idea of personal branding,
Hmm.
right? So he mentions the idea of personal branding, and it's a big part of what I do on LinkedIn. So part of the strategy, if you're starting out, part of the strategy was just add people into your connections. And I think, to this date, LinkedIn allows you to add about 100 people a week. Over the course of a year, you could add about, say, 5,000 people or so, give or take. Um, and you're basically building up an audience. You're building up an audience. And as you're building up an audience, if you send, well, how many messages could you send a day that are personalized? Maybe like 50 to 100 LinkedIn messages. I do one post, and that's 5,000 people who would see your post.
Hmm.
So the strategy is, how do you add content which how do you create content which adds value to your customers so that you stay top of mind when they're in a buying decision. So that's when a client is looking to hire for a role, or when a fee eligible candidate is looking to change jobs. So you can imagine 5,000 people from one post that takes 5 to 10 minutes compared to spending a whole day crafting messages where the response rate is about 5% on average. Um,
Hmm.
so you kind of do
It's a
the maths and
no-brainer.
think it's a no-brainer, right? And I think it's a big shame that a lot of people spend so much time on LinkedIn rather than engaging and talking with their customers, going out and meeting them, understanding what's important to them, because that's what you really
Hmm.
want to do. And I
Hmm.
see that in other markets, but for some reason in Japan, a lot of people spend a lot of time messaging people when the response rate is 5%.
Hmm. So were you actually getting replies like leads coming out of your content, out of your posts and saying, "Hey, I actually want to hire someone," or "Hey, I actually want to change my job," or was this just supplementary, or is it warming up people, or
So it takes time. It definitely takes time, and it's happening more now after 5 years.
hmm.
At the start, you still need to pair it up with outreach, whether that's outreach via message, like certain targeted messages,
Hmm.
right? Or it's a phone call. So I remember calling up one of the guys in the market, and he said this to me as I called him, and, hey, I'm Steven, I'm a dedicated cybersecurity recruiter, and this is what he said to me. He said, I was wondering when you were going to call me. So he's expecting the call, and he said, I really love what you're doing out in the market with these webinars, with these cybersecurity meetups. Let's partner together. So it helps people experience and feel you before you've ever engaged with them. So it did make it easier to when I was doing my outbound calls at the start.
Hmm. Because they already know who you are, because they're
Correct.
consuming your content.
Correct.
Yeah. Um, this is great, great stuff. And I know that you mentioned about Greg Savage, and you've also mentioned podcasts that you listen to. You're clearly, big on this kind of self-improvement, or consuming content to get you to that next level.
Hmm.
Um, and you've also mentioned coaching that
Hmm.
you've done. I'm curious, what is your experience specifically with having a coach?
That's great. So if you think about any athlete at the top of their game, they have a coach. They have a coach, and the coach's role is to point out things that you may not see in your blind spot. So an example for me, transitioning into leadership, this was something new to me, and I don't have that many reference points, and they give you a lot of reference points along the way. So I remember quite a few years ago, um, my my subordinate was next to me, so they're next to me here, and they just look at me, and I'm on the phone, I'm in back-to-back calls, I'm busy, and they're just looking at me, and I know that, oh, they want to say something. So, so take off my earphone. I'm like, yes, right? And they're like, oh, so Stephen, I don't understand the jobs we're working on. And keep in mind this is when you're kind of in a stress mode when you don't have much
Hmm.
time to think, and you think. And my default was to go to this phase of like, what do you mean you don't understand the jobs we're working on? You've been in every single client meeting with me. And they said, yeah, but like there's so many. Like, how do I prioritize? Like, how do I prioritize all this? And I replayed the story back to my coach, and my coach is listening. They're very empathetic, but they said this one thing to me, which I'll always remember. And they said, well, Stephen, when you say, shouldn't you know all the jobs we're working on, doesn't that sound judgmental? Doesn't it sound judgmental? So, wouldn't it have been better to say, what would be helpful then? Do you want a 30-minute whiteboard session, a 60-minute whiteboard session to go through the jobs to help you prioritize? Wouldn't they feel more comfortable approaching you the next time? Wouldn't they feel
Hmm.
more engaged in their work rather than pretend they know what's going on? And you're like, oh yeah, you're right. So
Hmm.
it's kind of nice to have someone there who's not afraid to slap you in the face because
Hmm.
everyone can kind of fall into their default pattern. And there have been numerous times where they've been able to call me out on things where I can actually improve and do better as a leader and as a communicator.
Hmm. So how long have you been doing coaching for?
I think it's been about 3.5 years or so,
Okay,
about 3.5 years, particularly
gotcha.
focused on the leadership aspect.
Hmm. Okay, understood. And how big is your team right now?
We have how many people? There's six of us in our team in total, including me. Yeah,
Okay.
and then I manage two leaders who manage their sub teams in
Hmm.
cybersecurity and data.
Hmm. Hmm. Excellent. Well, it's cool to hear your experience. I think a lot of the leaders that I've talked to in recruitment actually have coaches. And what's interesting about having that experience then is that you can then be the coach for your subordinates, right? To some extent, you can help to then pass along those same skills and that same knowledge. So it's cool to hear about this. And I think hopefully it's kind of growing in the, awareness of people in Japan. For your team, and Robert Half, people might be watching this and they might be thinking, "Wow, Steven seems pretty cool. I might want to work with him," or maybe in the future wanting to join your company. But what kind of person, I guess, would you say is a good fit for your team?
It's a good question, and I think whenever I look at hiring people, I look at what's their X factor, what makes them special, unique, what drives them, and where can they add value to our customers, our team, and where can we add value to them in their career growth and journey.
Hmm.
So one of the big things, because the market is looking to hire more bilingual or Japanese speaking people, we need Japanese speaking consultants to reflect that in the market is number one. So this is the interesting thing where people say we need experience, we need experience. I'm open as long as the person has strong characteristics to survive in it or to do well in a sales slash recruitment oriented job. And I'll give you an example. One of my colleagues referred someone he had no recruitment experience, but there was something about him that really stood out, and he just had he just got promoted to like a recruiting director. I think it was like over 65, 70 million yen type of thing. So they've billed a significant amount of money in their first 3 years of being a recruiter, no previous recruitment experience. And they used to work at a retail shop, managing one of those retail shops. And he said to me this, he said, look, the average customer purchases like 2.1 items. Uh, they would they would typically buy these types of things. So he understood really well, and he would engage with people really well. And I said, okay, I think you've got a good foundation. And he also has young children. So there was a drive about him, like I really want to do well, take care of my family. So when you see people like that, I would I would potentially rather invest in someone like that than someone who's kind of an average biller in the market because you know that they've probably hit their potential of what they can do versus someone who's got a lot of enthusiasm to drive, learn more, and do better. In that sense.
The drive, the kind of reason for them working um, to be better, and also the fact that they're kind of analyzing, no matter what the situation is, they're kind of thinking about how can I do this job better? How can I serve these people better? What's the data? This is the kind of thing that sounds like
Correct.
it speaks to you and would benefit the team. Um,
Correct.
excellent.
You would have a very good time working here if
Hmm.
you have that mindset because not only are you going to make a lot of money, you're going
Hmm.
to have fun being able to unleash your creativity into the world. And I know, I genuinely believe every single human being has some mighty mission, whether it's God or the universe that's put it inside you. And people want to reflect that creativity. And the biggest shame is when corporates say, no, you can't. You just need to focus on sending more CVs to clients.
Hmm.
Well, it kind of crushes that spirit, that desire to be like, well, I think there's a better way of doing things here. I think there's a better way, and I had a lot of freedom during a really tough time in COVID. So people saw that as a really tough time, right? COVID, the recruitment market basically collapsed in 2020 Q2, Q3. I personally actually had some of the best time in the recruitment market. And do you know why? It was because I was able to unleash a lot of creative things without the pressure of
Hmm.
having to perform or bill in that sense. So what I did is I did like 10 webinars focused on cybersecurity content, subject matter experts talking about what they do. And then I also had 4 career masterclasses. How do you prepare your CV during this time? How do you prepare for an interview? We also had mentoring programs. So I could see a lot of these young people who entered our mentoring program. I ended up helping them get a job later on. But I could also see how their careers grow through that 4 to 5 years. I think most of them almost doubled their salary since that point,
Wow.
starting. And I could see that they were hungry for learning, and I had that connection with someone who was more senior to help them along that way.
Hmm.
So it was actually a really fun time where, the rest of the business would be saying, well, you've got to work twice as hard for half the result because the market
Hmm.
sucks right now. And it's not a very empowering message, but focusing on what you can control is like, I'm going to build out an audience. I'm going to build out my LinkedIn profile. I'm going to build connections because I know this is not going to last forever. This is only a
Yeah.
temporary period right now, right?
Yeah.
So when the market did turn, I had a fantastic year building over 80 million yen in my second full year of recruitment
Hmm.
right after COVID because I had all the
Hmm.
contacts, clients and candidates that I built from all these types of activities from the webinars, mentoring program.
Hmm. That's brilliant. Did you have them, like the candidates, ask you for these things, or how did you come up with these ideas?
It's a good question. You're taking me back now. Um, I think I might have come up with the idea. It may have come up in a conversation, but it was just
Hmm.
I could see that a lot of these clients, um, they're really passionate about sharing their knowledge. And I
Hmm.
think when you have someone who's young and hungry for information, hungry to learn, it's really refreshing to be able to pass on that knowledge, and it feels like almost like a sense of duty to pass that on to other people. So you I think where it becomes really tough is when someone's not really interested in learning what you have. But if you could say someone to a young person and they just basically implement and do things and they become successful, I think that's really highly rewarding for the mentor to be a part of and seeing them grow in that journey.
Hmm.
So that was part of it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people would say, or maybe some recruitment owners would look at their people and they'd say, be creative, and then the people might start posting random, pictures of them going to the beach and what did they eat for lunch and this kind of thing, and talking about creativity, maybe some poems in there. But maybe this just came up as you're talking, but I think a good kind of litmus test, like a good compass of whether you're creating something that's just for creation and maybe for your own personal joy versus like this is something that is actually going to help your business is if it's helping the customer, right? Like if the mindset is I'm going to try my best to help the customer and express, think creatively to do this, to build this community and give them some things that are valuable versus just purely, you know, for your own self indulgence, I guess. But I don't know if you
I,
have any view on this.
and just to add to something just before that, people think about it's hard to post on LinkedIn. I don't have anything to say, or I feel like it needs to be more professional. It's definitely a
Mm,
balance. And one of the things I encourage people to do is just post about some of the conversations. So, for example, I had a conversation with a client who's, they're based from overseas, looking to hire in Japan, and I told them, here are the 5 reasons why it's hard to hire a cybersecurity professional here in Japan. So those types of stories that are interesting for one client are probably going to be interesting for a wider audience of people. So
yeah,
it's nothing, it's things that you think is nothing special, but to your customers, that, oh, that's actually insightful. So it doesn't have to be the best stuff, and definitely when I started out, it wasn't the best content. But it's a lot through trial and error to see how you can improve step by step along the way, which is what was important.
yeah. Maybe some people are overthinking it, and I don't want to like discourage people from posting about whatever they want to post about. But yeah, with this market information, this is the value of a good recruiter is having these conversations. That was part of it for me as well. I wasn't posting it on LinkedIn, but sending it out as a newsletter to people, and it was super effective. So find out where the people are. They might be on LinkedIn. If they're in tech, they're probably on LinkedIn. But they might be somewhere else, and getting them that information
And
to
here's
let
my
them know
here's
you're an
my
expert.
yeah, here's my pro tip is that your customers are more interested in hearing what you have to say rather than the hundreds of awards that your company is winning, right?
Mm,
So they're more interested in what
mm-hmm,
you have to say and what you have to say about the market than that.
mm-hmm.
So post
100%.
your original thoughts.
Yeah, this is great. This is great, man. I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up?
It's a good question. Uh, I think if there's a takeaway for people who want to add more value to their customers, it's develop a specialization because AI is going to steamroll general recruiters. If you're just a generalist
Hmm.
recruiter, you're going to get steamrolled by AI. But what they can't replace is deep, deep specialization because you're there adding a lot of value to your customers by knowing the market, knowing who's active, inactive at any given point in time. You know who are the people who can solve those problems without having to waste time doing a lengthy search, which may not eventuate. So if you want to add more value to your customers, highly, highly recommend specialize. If your company doesn't allow you to do that, I would consider moving on to another company which is more focused around serving their customers, which is more oriented towards seeing what the future looks like and not stuck in the past, focusing on KPIs, but really looking and seeing ahead and feeling like, wow, this leader knows what they're talking about. This leader has a vision for the company, and I want to be a part of that. Do yourself a favor and do your customers a favor by doing that.
Awesome. Wise words. I mean, I've learned a lot from speaking with you, um, and enjoy, yeah, your poise as well. Definitely seem like a great manager to work for and a great leader, for the future. So, yeah, much appreciated again for you coming on.
Thanks,
We'll
man. Thanks
talk
for having
soon.
me. It's been fun.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.